Hello everyone and welcome to my MEIOU and Taxes guide. So I'm going to show how the mod of Europa and Universalis 4 is working. So starting with a little bit of explanation of the general concept or like the general ideas, and follow up in separate videos with some more details about certain mechanics which we have to, let's say, learn to master over time if you want to have a successful campaign, or rather achieve your goals, because it's quite easy to go bankrupt. So, what you can see here first of all is the changed map of, well, the world basically, compared to the normal version, or like the unmodded version. We are starting almost 100 years earlier, so we can see certain differences, like in France, or the Ottomans are not yet that strong, so you can recover Rome here if you want to, but also the east of course looks more different. For example, Ming hasn't formed yet because it's still fractured, and you can reform it here, but you could also choose one of the other factions here to build a China with a different dynasty in charge. So a lot of stuff you could play here. You can also go into Middle America to play the Aztecs, for example, but we're going to focus on Europe because in the end it's Europa Universalis, and the core mechanics are probably easiest explained in a smaller country, and I'm looking at Naples here because it's pretty easy to play and therefore easy to explain and easy to take over if someone wants to start a campaign. So I definitely recommend Naples, or I can recommend Tunis here, or Tunisia, but I can also recommend something like let's say Hungary, for example. However, Hungary is bound to be in a lot of events, political events, so it's harder to master because it's also quite locked into the nobility. So of course there are other countries like Portugal or Castile, which are like the classic countries you could play, but I definitely want to recommend Naples here because in the end it's quite rich and quite easy to play, as it has a pretty solid position on the Italian peninsula and therefore is quite close to most of the developments which are going to happen. So let's get started. Definitely don't pick Iron Man mode, because the game is somewhat in an alpha, or like the mod is in some kind of an alpha, so there are still sometimes crashes occurring, and it's definitely useful if you run into something specific to provide a safe game if something goes wrong. So also don't be afraid, the game is definitely a little bit slower, much more slower than the normal game in regards to loading times and lags which you have in the game, because the engine of Europa Universalis 4 is basically pushed to the brink here. So if you're playing on a toaster, I definitely don't recommend playing this mod, because afterwards you maybe don't have a toaster anymore. It's definitely quite heavy on your GPU, I think. So as you can see, the loading time is significantly higher. And this is something which is consistent throughout the game, and depending on what your machine you have for playing it, this can be well, quite long, therefore be prepared. Okay, I think any second should be finished and then we are ready to go. Some words about Naples. So you have a pretty fractured Balkan neighborhood, and you have a quite solid North Italian region basically, and of course the Mediterranean is locked between the Muslim nations in North Africa, but also the larger states in the west, and the more fractured east, but with the Mamluks in the southwest. Yeah, so let's start. You sometimes, depending on the country, see some government reform pop-ups because not everything is, well, the vanilla government reforms which every country gets doesn't always work because some have specific ones for countries. I think Naples also is quite specific. So let's click away the starting events. So what you can see here now, first of all, is basically your start setup. You get a navy, you get armies, basically depending on the country and how rich you are. This can be smaller, can be bigger, but basically as known in the normal game, you have a starting setup. So also, yes, there's the startup event. So now everything is set up to go. However, there's still stuff we need to do, or I want to explain first. So I recommend to unlock the settings here because some of the stuff you have here, you could try it out. For example, you could change up the difficulty here, which is, do I have? No, okay. It's just the overlay in fact that it tells you which event is going to happen here. So in the end, you could set up the difficulty to your higher state. You could enable more tax to like countries you could form, like the Roman Empire, for example, can be enabled if you click here, for example. So you would need to go for a few tax more. Then you would, for example, have the Roman Empire if you want to do, for example, a Roman Empire run. So, but normally I would just recommend staying on this standard settings here, because that's basically the best way to play for the moment, unless you really want to spice it up significantly. You can also read into more settings of the mod in here, or like who is behind it. I'm one of the alpha game testers, therefore I have quite a high knowledge of the game, and therefore quite happy to show you what's going on. Okay, now we are in the 39th of December in 1356, and that's quite important because basically what we want to do, or what you want to do quite quickly, is to trigger the first New Year event, because most of the calculations the game is doing are happening on the 1st of January, and who's familiar with the game knows that a lot of stuff in Europa Universalis is handled by events, even in the background, so nothing here, you don't see it, but it's still an event in the background. So normally what you see are like political events, which you maybe know from the normal game, like you get some kind of prestige or administrative power or lose something, whatever. And these events are also used to calculate stuff in the background. Okay, now let's get going. So I don't want to talk about Naples that much, but basically what you can do here, you have two major options. One is you could expand into northern Italy and therefore try to go for Italia, or like go for the Roman Empire. You could also reclaim Sicily, which is yours. You have course on that if you want to. So you also have a puppet here, the Provence. You could use that to expand here. You could go for the islands or go for Tunisia, or you could go east. What I would recommend if you're a new player, definitely go east, and that's a lot easier. So let's have some music here. Why does it not work? Ah, now. So going into the east and basically taking stuff before the Ottomans are taking over is probably easiest. You can start in Albania, and that's very, very easy to do, and therefore quite a rewarding style of game. But enough about Naples, now we want to look into the core mechanics. So let's start with the main UI, which is definitely different to what you know. So everything is looking a little bit different, but the main UI you want to pay attention to is basically this one. You will be checking your provinces quite a lot, because all the data you are interested in is basically hidden here. So let's pick Bari for a start and check out the right side here. So you will notice there are no buildings, everything is completely looking different. The most important ones are the the 6, well, in fact it's more than 6 numbers and buildings and pictures here. And below here it's just information about what kind of taxes are levied from that province. Normally you don't need to interact with that or just check it out. It's just sometimes important to know that, for example, in here we have a high rent due, so we are taxing the peasants quite high here. However, I'm not going to go into detail here. It's just sometimes useful to understand how your country in fact works. This is automatically set in the background every year, so you don't have to interact with that at all. It's just for you useful to know how you're making money, for example. Most important are the buildings up here, because you have, for example, amenities here, which is a building, is considered a building, but in the background, which is providing infrastructure for your residents. And now you might ask me, like, what are residents? I've never heard about that. So the biggest change to compare to the normal game is in fact the population. And you have every province has populations in here. And there's a lot of details about how population works, how everything is calculated. So the development, which is similar to the normal base game, is not static. You cannot improve it, you cannot change it. Instead, it's calculated. So it's derived from the province values, for example, from your population. And depending on what it is doing there, you are richer or poorer. So basically these numbers represent how much money you make there or how rich that province is. First number represents the peasants. So it's basically rural development, like how much agriculture is going on, how much mining is going on, whatever. Then there's the second one, urban development. That's basically the residents. So how much urban infrastructure is in that province and how much money are you making from that? The last one is the upper class, which for example can be burghers, so traders for example, it can be nobles, it can be clerics, like the clerical class, so everything with religion, but it's also like education if you later on have universities or like a higher education in your province, and then also this upper class development can go higher. Yeah, so basically what you want to check at first, if you want to check out your country, you want to check your provinces to understand like, okay, I have some cities here, so best number to check out is the amenities here, because that's basically providing the housing for your residents. The higher this value is, the more population you can probably expect here. So for example, this province has 26,000 residents in Naples. Bari, for example, has 68,000. It's quite a big city in this time frame. And the other buildings here, or the other numbers which you can see here, is for example garrisons, protection for the province, irrigation, so improvements to agriculture, infrastructure to harbors, so trade, you get a bonus for trade there, you get also force limit for navy there and stuff like that. So at start, don't bother too much with that, just understand that you have provinces with different infrastructure levels and you want to check out like how your country roughly is set up. And if you want to conquer stuff, you want to check out what you might conquer. For example, if you would go for Athens here, you would get another city. So it has amenities here, it has a little bit of infrastructure for harbors and stuff like that. However, if you, for example, would go into Albania and conquer Belgrade here, you don't get a city, it doesn't have any resident population, no, it doesn't have anything, has no harbors and stuff like that. So if you were to conquer this one, you would have a problem here, because you basically can't your country is split from it because it doesn't have a harbor, and therefore your autonomy is going to go up and stuff like that. So you want to link stuff through a harbor, you want to build cities and get richer by that, but we are going to look at money at a later point. So the other values you want to check out, for example, let's take Bari again, is down here you have population, which is the two looking people here, and there's something like industry and property. Property gives you an overview of what you can do in the province. For example, this province has farmlands which are partly used, but it could also have some mines, it could have fisheries which are full right now. And therefore you created industries and jobs where your population is working, which can expand over time and therefore make you richer or poorer. So if you play it for the first time, you basically can sit back because most of the stuff is handled in the background relatively good. So like then the province is rich and your people are making money, they're going to invest it back into the industry, and as long as there's space, like there's expandable property in here, they are going to do that. The only thing you have to do by hand is, for example, opening up new industries, which is of course relevant if you go into colonization, if you conquer stuff, for example, in the east, like where the hordes are here. For example, if you are playing Russia and you go into horde territory, you have to set up a lot of industries because they might not be present. For example, let's take I don't know. Let's take Sarai al-Makri, Marcus, I don't know how to spell it. This one has only nomadism as an industry, so it requires to have nomads there, so no peasants, no residents, nothing. It's just nomadic people. So if you want to conquer that, you would start settling them, you would have migration to that province, and you would need to open up new industries. So here you would, for example, have 1,450 possible farmland, quite a lot. But this region in general here is great farmland, so it's worth to conquer, but you have to build everything. So that's not recommendable if you're a new player. Instead, you should stick to your starting provinces. For example, if you check out, I don't know, let's check out Calabria here. Calabria is quite rich in the peasant department. It has decent infrastructures because it has a lot of farmland. There's still a lot of open room here. Also, just as an explanation, so if you check out the farmland, it says 122 of 277, so you can expand there, but it's also profitable, which is the number behind there. It has the population or the industry here is doing a profit. So it will expand over time and you don't have to really bother about it. Also, your people are making money, so they are richer and happier and therefore don't want to revolt, most likely. And that's basically what you want to check out in your country. And there are of course other things here in each province. Let's take Bari again. You see a lot of pop-ups down here, which are mostly information which you can check out. For example, you have a minor center of production, which is just saying, okay, this province is known for being productive, which you can get over time if you build up industries and stuff like that. It depends, of course, on the regions where you are, so there are limited amounts of centers of production, but it's basically a small bonus for what you did here or what you have there. Yeah, other stuff here. For example, also a bonus because it's the largest regional city, so it's the largest city in the south of Italy and stuff like that. Also, you get information about the religions in that province. A lot of stuff which you can check out over time. And most importantly, if you press the button A, you can skip through stuff. Let's show it on the property screen. So when you check and go through that, you can see the population owning the stuff, for example, on page 2. On page 3, you would see I think the profitability is here more or less, and on page 4, for example, you would see the buildings like the irrigation systems and how much money they cost to maintain and stuff like that. So there's a lot of information in there, and most of that you don't need for your daily doings here. Because after all, you maybe just want to map paint because you are playing the Ottomans and you just wanted to conquer everything, then you really don't interact with that. If you, for example, want to play Lübeck and play a very small country and building tall, then you of course are going to be checking out a lot of more details about your provinces, about your people and stuff like that. So in the end you can just check them out, but it's not that important. It's just getting important over time. One other I just want to have a mention here is the terrain, which is most of the time far on the left. It will give you information about general information like the climate settings of that province and what deposits are there. For example, this province can grow olives and you can mine salt from the sea here. So, and if we check out the property, in fact, mines are not built there. So we could, for example, expand into a sea salt industry here. A small one, 45 isn't that much, but it's a small one. We could expand that if we want to. But we are not going to do that here. So that's basically one of the main UIs here, which you always want to interact with and check out how your provinces are doing, like how rich are they, how much money are they making. For example, this province here is making 0.16 ducats, this one is doing 0.51 ducats and stuff like that. You get manpower, you get naval materials, you don't get any here, but you get some here, which is basically used for ships and therefore your force limit and stuff like that. So the other stuff you want to check out, of course, are the normal menus up here, which you already know. Some of them are changed, especially the estates one, but we are going to not going to check it out right now. Instead, I just want to explain, if you start a new campaign, just get an overview of your countries, check out your ideas that you have. For example, you have a diplomacy group unlocked here and administration ideas unlocked, administrative ideas, which is a really, really good setup as a start. You have some ideas which are specific for Naples. For example, you get a reduced cost for garrisons and for everything you build. You have a corruption reduction and stuff like that, and improved relation is always useful if you conquer stuff. Improved relation increases the speed that the aggressive expansion is decaying, for example. A lot of very useful stuff. Check it out in your time and feel free to play Naples. One of the most important things you always need to check out is your autonomy. So autonomy is very, very harsh compared to the normal game. You can't reduce it by pressing a button. So if I go to Calabria here and I have a 55% autonomy here, I can't just click a button to reduce it. It's not possible. You have to do it by building your country. One of the most important way to reduce autonomy is, on the one hand, to keep your people happy. On the other side, it is to reform your country to a more modern one. For example, establishing a bureaucracy which is handling your country. Of course, also, like how far is it from your capital also plays around. It's called communication efficiency, which is like here. Rapid communication, so it's very close. You can improve that by building harbors and stuff like that, or roads, and developing new ideas and technologies. It's going to increase that, but you can also build stuff, and everything is going to play a role in autonomy. And that's something you always want to check out, because if the province has 100% autonomy, you're not making any money from it, because it's going instead to your population there, because it's getting corrupted and they are just feeding it into their pockets and not going to give it to the state. Which brings us to one of the second most important values you want to check out, especially at start. It's the centralization. In the normal game, I think it's called absolutism. The centralization is how centralized your state is, and therefore how much impact you have on your provinces directly. And it's one of the main gains of autonomy reduction and also other values. So you definitely want to increase that over time, which brings us to this one of the actions you should do at the start of the game. You go here for decisions, and normally, depending on the country you play, but I think in like 90% of all cases, you want to go with a centralized state policy from the get-go. Most of the time you want to do that. And that's going to increase over time our centralization, therefore improve our communication efficiency, and therefore our autonomy here slowly but steadily. And when we are already in the screen here, policies and decisions, you're going to see a lot of decisions here. Most of them are, however, not necessary at start. Interesting ones are the interactions with the provinces. For example, if I want to build up in Bari, I want to build the salt industry now. We already discovered it. So, terrain, checked, it has a sea salt deposit, and we checked it here. It has open mines. Now we maybe want to open it up. Then we have to interact with the province. So we can press a button here, select province, and you're going, when you go into the political view, you're going to see a small red dot here, which is saying like, okay, you marked this province. Let's select another one, check out this one. Now it has mining enabled. This one also doesn't have mines, and it also has a sea salt deposit. So we're going to select it too. And now we have 2 provinces selected. And we can open a new slot, which is basically opening up a new industry. And we could select here sea salt and a lot of other stuff. But in this case, we want to select sea salt here and build a new industry. That's how you would do it if you want to. Of course, you can also check out other stuff. For example, you could select this button here, select a state. That's a little bit wrong, but you could, for example, select all stated provinces. Then we are going to press the button here, and now we have all provinces we own selected. And now one of the most informative and very useful decisions you could do, or like interactions you could do, is conduct a census. It's immediate, so don't be afraid to press it. Works only on selected provinces only. Yes, we did that already in the background. We want to conduct a census here, and we want to check out our population. So we want to check out statistics here. And now we can see statistics about everything we own. For example, we have almost 1.5 million peasants or tenants. We have 300,000 residents. We have 36,000 nobles and stuff like that, and some burghers and some clergy, and overall we barely have below 2 million people. So you could do stuff like that. You could also go, for example, for an industry survey, a census here. Then you would see that our country is producing food, salt, and other stuff. If you go to scroll through here, all the stuff the country is producing is listed here. And it's quite useful to check this once in a while. For example, we can see here now that we have a deficit in fuel and raw materials. Both of them are, for example, produced in forests. So you would need forests and then timber industries and stuff like that, which of course in South Italy isn't that common. We also have a deficit in fiber, which we could produce via agriculture. But we also have a deficit in exotics, which are of course not possible to produce here, because exotics is something from the Far East or from the Americas and stuff like that, which can be produced there. Or like the easiest exotic which is available close by to Italy is, in fact, if you go, for example, here to Yemen, it would be coffee, which can be produced here, which is producing exotic goods and therefore can be traded here. So normally in the background, your countries are going to trade with another, so you would probably trade with the Mamluks down here, and the Mamluks would trade with Yemen to get the coffee from there to here, and then from there to Naples, and therefore all of them are making a profit, depending how well or how rich your people are and want to pay for it. But that's, as said, is handled in the background. Delicacies are, for example, the olives we can produce here. Luxuries are luxury clothes, for example, or gold or stuff like that is producing luxury goods, which is a higher industry, which of course also needs rich people to buy, which we don't have that many of, therefore our demand isn't that big. Yeah, and then there are also a lot of other goods, which, for example, these ones are all from urban industries like consumer goods, military goods, naval goods like ships, industrial goods like building materials and stuff like that, and knowledge production, commerce production, like a lot of stuff you could check out here about your country to check out what you produce, what you maybe lack, what you maybe want to conquer. For example, if we have a deficit of food, we might want to consider conquering Tunisia or into the Ottomans or into the Mamluks, stuff like that, where we can get food. Yeah. So that's basically the most important stuff right now. And in the next guide, I'm going to check out the estates, which are another system you are going to interact with a lot, because over the estates, you are going to modernize your country and guide your goals of the campaign, depending on what you want to do. So see you next time.